Have you or a student in your class received an approved memory aid accommodation? Watch this video to learn more about what they are, your responsibilities in the submission and approval process, and how to create them. There are two types of memory aid accommodations, trigger sheets and formula sheets. These are separate accommodations that can be used in graded assessments and are only provided in limited and specific cases. To receive them, students must provide evidence of a medical condition or learning disability where they can learn information but struggle to retrieve it from memory without cues or triggers, and evidence that no other accommodation would meet the same need. There are different rules for creating each of these accommodations to ensure that they both promote equity while also adhering to academic integrity. First, let's talk about trigger sheets. Trigger sheets are a single-sided 8.5 by 11-inch page with a white background that can be handwritten, typed, or a combination of both. Any writing must also be legible and in English. Information on the trigger sheet must not contain any clear course content, including formulas, definitions, course diagrams, or other written examples. Instead, all information must be coded into mnemonics or symbols, and only the student who created the tool should be able to understand what the symbols mean. These are examples of appropriate trigger sheets. Information on them is completely coded. And here are two that would not be appropriate. They include titles, examples, formulas, and definitions that are clear to anyone who looks at them. Next, let's talk about formula sheet accommodations. A formula sheet is a separate single-sided 8.5 by 11-inch page that can also be typed or handwritten. Students will include direct formulas on this page, but that should be the only thing on it. Formula sheets cannot include any titles, instructions, steps, conversions, or examples. Students should also only include formulas that are most difficult for them to recall. As such, memory aids do not replace studying, and students must have a solid understanding of course content for them to be useful. Developing formula lists and memory cues early in the semester can help make them more meaningful and effective. The memory aid submission process must include the student, their SAS advisor, and the professor. At the beginning of every semester, students who have an approved memory aid accommodation must request it and activate it on the SAS portal. Students are then required to create an appropriate memory aid. They should discuss the procedure with their SAS advisor and watch this video or meet with the SAS Writing and Learning Specialist for more information. Once completed, students must email their memory aid to their professor with their advisor copied. Students are responsible for sending this email at least 7 days before the assessment. The professor will then review the memory aid. During this stage, the professor can either approve the memory aid, request revisions, or disallow the tool entirely if they determine that its content compromises course objectives or academic integrity. When issues are identified, professors should offer the student the opportunity to revise and resubmit if there is time to do so. Professors are responsible for upholding academic integrity and must not approve a memory aid that includes clear course content. Once the professor believes that the tool is completely coded and does not compromise academic integrity, they are required to send clear approval by email to the student. Students must then forward that email chain to the exam center with the professor's approval clearly documented at least 3 business days before the assessment. On the day of the assessment, exam center staff will give the student a copy of their memory aid printed in full color. The student must hand in the memory aid with their completed assessment. If the student does not follow these steps or meet the required timelines, it is likely they will not be allowed to use the memory aid for that assessment. Here is the checklist to confirm your responsibilities. Please pause the video as needed. When reviewing course material, identify what topics might appear on the exam and what parts of them might be most difficult to recall. Remember, you cannot include all course content, and overcrowding it can make finding relevant triggers more challenging. Next, create mnemonics or visuals that represent course content to help prompt your recall. They will act like a key to a locked filing cabinet. The information is already stored in your memory, but you may just need a hint to help unlock it. Mnemonic devices can range from simple to abstract and should be created by the student. What types of mnemonic devices can you use on your trigger sheet? There are so many options. Try creating acronyms where you use one word to represent a larger phrase or group of words. For example, BEDMAS is an acronym for the standard order of operations in a math problem. Acrostics are another great option, where you create a phrase and the first letter of each word in that phrase represents something else that you are trying to recall. For example, my very educated mother just served us nachos represents the order of the planets. Does course content ever remind you of a song? Add in some song lyrics too. For example, Taylor Swift's lyric, "We are never ever ever getting back together," could help represent an irreversible chemical reaction. Remember, you can also include visuals on your trigger sheet as long as they are not diagrams that were used in class or copied straight from the textbook. Instead, develop your own simple images, symbols, or emojis to represent course content. Use them on their own or combine together to help recall content that is more complex. For example, if you need to remember the 5 stages of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and their order, ask yourself, what image could represent each stage, and then line those symbols up beside each other. After creating some mnemonic devices, do a test drive and try them out. If they are not triggering your memory, you may need to practice them more or think of a different mnemonic tool. It can also be helpful to organize the page in a way that helps you identify specific content easier as well, like using different colors for different types of information, grouping similar content together, or adding section dividers on the page. Remember that everyone's memory aid will look different, so choose devices and organizational strategies most helpful for you. In summary, it is a shared responsibility of students, professors, and SAS advisors to understand the purpose of memory aids, follow the proper submission process, and ensure that cues support equity and academic integrity. Working together will help ensure that these accommodations are fair, meaningful, and aligned with course goals.